welcome you all here today, and I ask you to join me in prayer. Lord God, we know that you touch us in many ways, but sometimes the hardest time is to see you in the difficulties, the trials of life. And yet in true faith, we know that you are there, that you walk with us, you strengthen us, you touch us, you hold our hands, and you walk us through those difficult days, and you bless us. One of the realities of our faith is the Easter message, that of death and resurrection. And we find that not only in the final end, that you give us the promise of everlasting life, but we find it in all the darkness of days, where you give us new life and bring out of the darkness blessings and great strength, because we have endured and we have been faithful in the midst of trial and tribulation. We ask you to be here today and to bless us all. As Alex tells us his story of faith, a story of journey, a story of difficulties, but a story of many blessings. We ask you to help us all to see in our own lives the image of your love and your goodness, and how we have walked through the difficulties of this life, and how we have been blessed by the fullness of your love, even in the trials that we have endured. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
It's my honor and my privilege to introduce to you our speaker today, who I've known for many, many years. Alex has been a parishioner here in his younger days, and his dad is here today with us. He now lives in the parish and on Lemoyne, and his wife Barbara's here, and she is his faithful companion and one who is there for him. And many people who have touched his life. We have some of the people of St. Lawrence here as a support to Alex, those on the staff and those in the parish. For Alex in his last career, he's had many careers in his life, worked at St. Lawrence for many years in the job as administrative assistant. I don't know what you call the Father Folletta, but anyway, what needed to be done, he did. I think that's the stipulation. And not only did he do that in the administration part, but he was also very active in their RCIA program and giving many of the talks and carrying out that ministry. He has also been very, very active in civic jobs here in Monroe County in Greece, and worked very hard for the citizens of our community. And that was in his life when he was able to do even more things, although I don't know if it ever really slowed him down, even to now. I went to visit him a couple months ago, and we were started talking, and then he told me about that he was going to do a presentation at St. Lawrence. And so I thought, well, if they can have it at St. Lawrence, we can have our native-born son come here. And so that is how this all came about. And Alex is very, very pleased to be able to share with you the story of his faith journey. Alex?
Thank you,
Father.
Father. Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, let me thank all of you for coming. It was very nice of you. And those of you from St. Lawrence, I guess you're a glutton for punishment, sitting through this a second time. And it's nice to reacquaint myself with people that I've known for many years here at Holy Cross. I'd like to start out with a disclaimer, if I may. First of all, I'm not a motivational speaker, nor am I a spiritual speaker. I'm just an ordinary person, just like each of you in this room, who's had some challenges in his life. And I would like to just recount those challenges and how, and then talk to you a little bit about how my faith has sustained me through these challenges and through some pretty difficult times. I call this the journey God asked me to take, and it starts in 1975. I was 25 years old, and I was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease, kidney disease. And this diagnosis came 4 days after we buried my mother, who had died at age 48 of breast cancer. And 3 weeks after I landed what I considered my dream job, the beginning of my career, and that was as staff assistant to then County Manager Lucian Morin. And this job would ultimately bring me to the position of Assistant County Executive for Monroe County. At that time, the diagnosis came like as a 1-2 punch with the death of my mother and then this diagnosis of kidney disease. And for about the next 18 months, the doctors monitored the progression of the disease, and in 1977, I began dialysis. During this time, the time from the diagnosis to the ultimate failure of the kidneys and beginning dialysis, I began to suffer some of the effects of the kidney disease. I remember driving to work early in the morning and having to stop the car along the side of the road so I could get out and vomit and get back in the car and keep going. Or sometimes when I was at meetings at work and the headaches were so bad that I had to excuse myself and go in the bathroom and put cold compresses on my face and then ultimately go back to the meetings. But I figured, well, you know, I can deal with this. I grew up in Shalat. Tough guy, you know, so I can handle this. And when I started dialysis, I asked the doctor, you know, what's the average length of time that someone survives on dialysis? And back then, it was about 6 years. And they said, but, you know, we would expect that you'd be transplanted before then, and your survival rate is much longer. I said, well, I can deal with this. And I set out to prove that I could handle both my career and this disease. For the next 10 years, over the next 10 years, I had 3 kidney transplants, 1 here in Rochester and 2 down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they were kind of at the time on the cutting edge of transplantation and immunosuppressant drugs. And but for me, none of the kidneys took. They all failed pretty quickly after they were implanted. And on top of that, after the last transplant, I suffered a reaction to an antibiotic that they had given me, and it destroyed the cells in my inner ear. So consequently, I had no balance, no equilibrium. So while I was recovering from the surgery, I had to deal with that as well, and took considerable amount of time to learn to walk again without falling over, without bumping into walls, and I was able to learn to compensate for the loss of equilibrium by sight and by touch. And I was able to move around very quickly. But it played havoc with my tennis game, I'll tell you. So, and I also proved my grandmother right when she said that I was a gabadost, a hardhead. For many a time that I fell on the floor or banged my head into a wall, but it worked. And over the next few years, I was, it seemed like I was on the, you know how you have the book a month club? I think I was on the surgery a month club. I was constantly in and out of the hospital for one surgery after the next relating to the kidney disease. And ultimately, I've had more than 60 major surgeries, more than 100 surgical or medical procedures. And you find faith pretty quickly when you are lying bare naked on a cold hospital table in a cold hospital room with doctors and nurses poking and prodding and putting needles in you and other devices, and then you hear those fateful words. Now start with 100 and count backwards, and you get to about 98. Actually, I never did bother to count because I learned very quickly that at that point I was in God's hands, because nothing I was going to do was going to determine whether I woke up after the anesthesia or not. And as much as I thought I was in control, I realized pretty quickly that that was not going to be the case. So instead of counting backwards, I would just say a prayer. Lord, I'm in your hands. I'm in your hands. And that always seemed to work for me. And I'll come back to this theme in a little bit. I'll just want to finish this chronology. The lowest point in my life, both physically and emotionally, came in I think 1992, early 90s, when I had just a total collapse. I was suffering pain in my abdomen and stomach, and I just couldn't figure out what it was. Ultimately, I ended up going in the hospital, having 4 surgeries in 3 weeks. And they found that I had a ruptured appendix that seemed to heal, or not heal, but seal itself, and was leaking, and created all kinds of abscesses in my abdomen. And this was on top of all the scar tissue from the transplants. And to make a long story short, they had to operate 4 times to get all of these abscesses cleaned out. And they put me on heavy doses of medication. At the time, they told my family that if I recovered, I probably would have to be institutionalized because I was kind of around the bend. I didn't know where I was, what was happening to me. And they finally realized that it was the medication that they were giving me, and so they stopped all of that medication, and I gradually came around and survived that episode. But at the same time, all of this was happening, and I was in the hospital. My marriage had failed. I was in the process of a divorce. I was teaching part-time at one of the local colleges, I had several consulting jobs that I was working on, and I went back to school for my PhD at Syracuse University. So I was commuting to Syracuse to take my coursework. I had gotten my master's there, and I was just going to add these courses to that and then do the dissertation. Well, I had all of these things going. I was sick. You know, it was like my life had just come apart at the edges and it was falling out around my feet. And at that point, the doctors came to me and said, you know, you can't work anymore. You're going to have to stop all of the things you're doing and think of some other course for your life. And with that, I thought, well, it's better to be dead than live a life like this. And I was really at the lowest point. Had it not been for my family and friends to help sustain me, I don't think I would have made it through that period of life. But I did. And I decided that if I couldn't work, at least let me do volunteer work. My whole career had been in public service, and that's what I knew, that's what I wanted to do. And if I couldn't serve the public in any other capacity, I would do it through volunteer work. And I was living at St. Lawrence in St. Lawrence Parish at the time. So I volunteered over there. I volunteered on some community agencies. And the work at St. Lawrence, through the work at St. Lawrence, Father Flutta offered me the job of business manager on a part-time basis, and number one lackey to him. And I readily accepted that. And then the job became more lackey than business manager. But it worked, and I spent 18 years in that job. Also, to my great benefit, along the way, while I was doing community work, in I think 1999, I met Barbara. I never expected after my divorce to ever remarry again. I sold the house and had to get a new one, and so I had a home built, small home built, right around the corner from where I grew up. And that spot used to be a vacant lot with some scrub apple trees in it and that. But my house is right on the spot where my buddies and I used to build forts in the woods there. So I've come full circle in my life. Barbara and I married in 2000, and she's been my partner and now is my caregiver ever since. The next few years, from 1992 till 2010, I think, was a repeat of in and out of the hospital. You know, it's one thing to go into a restaurant and have the owner of the restaurant greet you and take you to your favorite table. But when you go to an x-ray room in the hospital and everybody knows you by your first name and you know what to do, Al, you know, go ahead and hop on the table. Or you go into an operating room and you know everybody there by their first name. You know, that's a dubious distinction. But in 2010, New Year's Eve, 2010, I was at dialysis, and the doctor and Barbara noted that my access, where they put the needles in for dialysis, was looking funny. And they were concerned that it might, might explode, might break open and blood all over the place. They wanted me to go into the hospital. Well, I was adamantly opposed to going into the hospital, especially on New Year's Eve. And no, I'm just not going to do this. Well, they won over, and it was a very good thing, because on New Year's Day, that access blew. And that access is right into an artery. So I was gushing blood like you couldn't believe. But I was in the hospital, and they were able to take me right down to the surgery room and get that fixed up very quickly. But what that led to was another series of surgeries. And finally, when I got out of the hospital in January, February of 2011, I got home, promptly fell out of bed, and took the skin of my arm from my elbow to my wrist off. And that put me back in the hospital with, but they couldn't stitch it. They had to just let it grow by itself. They put the skin back on and let it grow by itself. And that was more time in the hospital. After that, that was kind of the beginning of the end for me in terms of any, active life. I forgot to mention one thing. I'm sorry about that. As time went on, and I'm feeling the effects of long-term dialysis through the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, I started to suffer the effects of long-term dialysis with severe neuropathy. Started in my legs and has gone up into all of my appendages, and now is in my my stomach and abdomen. As you can see from my hands, I have no ability to close my hands or make a fist, which plays havoc when I try to feed myself any kind of food. My chair at the house is like a high chair with a little baby that, I get food all over the place when I'm eating. The other thing that happened to me over time is I started to lose my vision and ultimately went blind. And I've been that way now for 4 years, Barb? Yeah. I think 4 years. And tried driving the other day. That doesn't happen well either.
Oh, Alex.
Bumper cars. So, after my last hospitalization, I had decided I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in the hospital anymore. Well, the doctors had also made the same decision. They came to me, and all of my doctors in a meeting, and said to me that there was nothing more that could be done for me medically or surgically. The condition of my body is such that they can't operate on me, that if they put a scalpel in my skin, the skin's just going to rip. It's not going to be a surgical cut, that my skin is so fragile that it will just rip apart. So any surgeries are out. And they've done everything they can do for me medically. They have, the only thing left is to dialyze me, and I have catheters in my chest that allow them to do that. So I was faced with, we're going to send you home, and when dialysis, when you can no longer be dialyzed, then we, suggest that you consider calling it quits. And they put me into palliative care, which is designed, it's the step before hospice. And the idea is just to make you feel comfortable. If you have pain, take care of the pain. Whatever symptoms you have, they treat the symptoms. They don't try to resolve any problems. And, just do whatever you want to do and enjoy life until the end comes. And they kept talking to me about, this way I'm in control, and I can decide when I want to call it quits, depending upon my quality of life. They kept talking about, you can decide when your quality of life is not what you want it to be. And boy, I had a hard time getting my head around all of this, because I learned at the beginning of all of this, hospitalizations, all of this the medical problems I've had, I learned very quickly that I really am not in control. It's God that's in control. And I learned to surrender myself to God's will. And I'll tell you exactly how I learned that, and exactly how that message was driven home to me. I thought about, we always hear that God loves us, kind of in a plural term. And, the nuns always taught us that we were made by God in His image and likeness, and so that His love extended to each of us. Yeah, okay, that comes from nuns, you know what so we all, you have this kind of amorphous thought about God. But then I started to think a little bit deeper about that, and I came to realize, stop and think, if you would, okay? Stop and think for a minute, that of all the billions of people that have gone before us on this earth, and the billions of people that occupy the earth right now, and the billions of people that will come after us, God made me. God didn't decide that He was going to make a race of Caucasians today, and tomorrow a race of Asians or Hispanics. God created each of us as an individual. He created me, Alex Dipasquale, He may have given me the gene that carried this disease, but He also gave me many other attributes that help me survive and deal with this. And it occurred to me how tremendous God's love is for us, but especially for me. How God's love is unfathomable. His love is without end. There is no parameters to that love. And that hit home with me, that He loves me in such a way that I should never fear living my life. And I should never be afraid of what life has to offer. And I remind myself of that every day, more than once. To me, God is not out there somewhere. God is right here with me. I talk to God many, many times during the day, sometimes in prayer, but sometimes just have a chat. If it's a wonderful, nice day like the few days we've had this past week, and I'm sitting out on the patio enjoying the sunshine. And I'll kind of say, hey, Lord, nice day, huh? You made a nice day for us today. Now, some of the neighbors may think that's a little weird as they're walking by the house, but it works for me. And I understand God's love for me. And I understand that I don't have any fear for what comes my way in life. So when the doctors told me that I was going to go into palliative care, which, by the way, when I asked them, like I had asked about dialysis, I asked them, what's the average length of time? They said, well, for you and the condition you're in, 2 weeks to 2 months. I'm now going on my 7th month, and they kind of have put me into a different category now of palliative care. So there's no way that I am going to call an end to my life because I don't like the quality of life that I have. That's up for God. And whatever his decision is, I'm okay with that because he's the boss. Now I have to shift gears here for a minute and tell you another story about this faith I have. I have always said that you cannot drive the car looking out the rear view mirror or looking out the rear window. You always have to look forward. You always have to go forward. You can't worry about what has been, what could have been. That's just a waste of time and energy. And I was telling Father Whelan that one day. He said, well, sometimes it's not bad to check the rear view mirror once in a while. And he's right, you know. And with this palliative care, I've had the opportunity to kind of look out the rear window and check the rear view mirror and think back on my life. And what I'm finding is I can see God's hand at different points in my life. You know, for example, when the doctors told me I could no longer work, you know, and I'm not one to sit around too much. The choice I made to do volunteer work has helped me greatly, not only my own sanity, but to give back to people, continue the career I had chosen, public service, but just doing it in a different way. It also brought me to meeting Barbara and starting a whole new life with Barbara that I never expected would happen, which has been a wonderful life. And I can look back at different points in my life and realize where God's hand has touched my life. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't recognize it at the time, but I had the faith to put my trust in God. And as I look back, I realized that that trust was right because God guided me in different ways in my life. And I've come to realize also the importance of my family and my friends in my life. They've sustained me through all of this, and that's a gift from God. And so everywhere along the path that I have journeyed, God has been there with me to help me in the difficult times and to celebrate with me in the good times, the happy times. I expect that to continue for as long as God wants it to continue. And when the time comes for him to call me home, I will look forward to that. I will look forward to that with hope of eternal salvation. And I will have no regrets on my life because it's been the journey that God has asked me to take. And that's the message that I want to share with you today. If you can learn to keep your faith and trust in God, and that is not easy to do, because we as human beings want to control our own destiny and want to control our lives. And especially me, I have this, what's it called? Compulsive disorder. What is that?
Obsessive compulsive.
Obsessive compulsive. I have to control everything. And, you know, there's a place for everything in its place, all of that. And it's taken me a lot to be able to break out of that and to give up control. To give up control to Barbara in my daily routine. And to give up control, to surrender my life to God. But if you can do that, you go through life without fear. And fear drives us to make bad choices, make bad decisions. It drives us to do things that we otherwise would not do. So by putting our trust in God, our faith in God, and surrendering our will to His, allows us to go through life without fear and to enjoy life to the maximum. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I accept where I am in life. I've accepted where I have been in life at every step along the way. And I've let God determine where that next step would take me. I haven't been afraid of what life offered. And with God's help, I've been living a good life and still am living a good life. And that's the message I wanted to convey to you today. And I thank you for listening.
Alex and Barb yesterday shared with me a little story that I thought was interesting. He had some prescription medicine given by the doctor who was in charge of palliative care, who has since left, and there's another younger doctor there. And he had to get a new prescription because it had run out. And they called the nurse, and the nurse said, well, I don't know, because in palliative care, we generally never have to give a new prescription. And so they probably will have to give a few more new prescriptions, too. Do you want to take some questions, Alex?
I would love to.
Okay, does anyone have any particular questions? Yes?
Alex, I've known you for...
Would you identify yourself so he can, because...
Alex, I'm Bill Ernest.
Hi,
I
Bill.
will remember when I would take you and my kids up to Aquinas on cold, wintry days.
Yeah, oh, yes.
That was one thing. But aside from that fact, you are total inspiration to everyone here, especially you.
Thank you. Thank
I'm a clergyman. I've heard some people all over the world talk. Nothing so moved me as yours today. And you should be congratulated. And Barbara,
you. Thank you.
you should be congratulated for the fine work you're doing. And I can only say, good Lord, thank you for the Alex Dipasquale.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions?
I gotta say something, Alex.
Okay, Ann.
What else?
Mary Ann.
Oh, Mary Ann.
Uh-oh. Alex, I can remember you when you still worked with Lucian Moore. Here he'd come into dialysis in a three-piece suit with his briefcase, washing up his hands, and we're all ready for me to stick needles in his arm. He'd sit there for the 3 hours, and he'd leave with a blood pressure of like 80 over 60. I go, Alex, how can you drive? Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll get there, don't worry. And that went on for I don't know how many more years. He'd be leaving, I'd be going, I'm glad I'm not leaving this place right now because I wouldn't want to be driving out there with Alex driving out there. But Alex is an
That's right.
inspiration
That's
to
right.
the dialysis unit because, I mean, he's been on dialysis for over 25 years now.
35.
Now it's 35.
The first 25 were a
They were
breeze.
easy. But I mean, he keeps coming in, and everybody, everybody knows Alex. He sits up in front, and Barb the saint over there puts up with this guy all the time. She is a saint 3 times over.
She is.
I mean, she
She is.
drives him back and forth. I mean, she had her own health crisis to go through, and I just don't know how the two of them do it. But, you're an inspiration to everybody else.
Thank
And
you.
You know I love you.
Oh,
Okay?
yes.
Even though I stick you.
I would like to say something about Barbara. 9 months after we were married, Barbara was diagnosed with breast cancer and lost a breast to that disease. She is probably the strongest woman I know, strongest person I know. She stuck with me through thick and thin. And there have been some days when I've not been the most pleasant person to be around. And one of the prayers that I say each morning is to allow me to control my temper and my mouth and give up control of everything else. And she's been on the receiving end of that sometimes, but she's hung in there and takes very good care of me. And the message that I have was kind of tailored to people that suffer illness and face different crises. But the people who support them, the caregivers and the support people, also should listen to that same message, because God is guiding them as well in what they are doing and giving them the strength, the courage to hang in there and to put someone ahead of themselves. And without Barbara, I could not do this. Without the love of Barbara, my family, my friends, and one of my college roommates is here today, representing the gang that has been friends for 42 years. And they've all been there with me. So the message is universal. It's not just for people that suffer health problems, but for people that are in any kind of crisis, and for the people who love them and support them and help them. And Barbara, wherever you are, I love you and I thank you for your support.
Sharon, do you have a question?
If I can stop crying.
Is that?
Thank you for your sense of humor. That's an inspiration. But how did you decide to come out and witness, Alex, to people? Because it is such an inspiration. I mean, it takes energy, and when you don't feel well, and I know that, I want to crawl under a blanket or something, but you've come out and done this. And I just wondered how, when, what the thought was, who encouraged you, what brought you to...
When was the thought? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of it. When was the thought that
That you would do this, that you would come speak.
come here and
Go back
speak?
Yes, but testimony.
Well, it was a few months ago. actually very shortly after I started palliative care, I did not want to stop helping others, serving others. I mean, that's been my whole life. In the times I've spent in government, the community service that I've done, any volunteer work, I've always tried to serve other people. And I did not want to stop that. And so in a discussion I was having with Jamie O'Mara, who's a religious ed director at St. Lawrence and who's a good friend of mine, and she's here today, we were talking about how I could continue to be helpful despite the limitations that I have. And it was actually her idea to give this presentation at St. Lawrence, and then Father Whelan, who has been just great, coming by to visit me at home on a regular basis. We were talking about it, and he suggested doing it here. And I'm more than happy to do it here or anywhere, to a group or one-on-one. If I can be of service, that's what I want to do.
You know, the real reason is I offered you free coffee.
That's right. And it's pretty good coffee.
Yeah. Yes, Jamie.
Alice, it's Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
And just to piggyback on your question of what made him come out, I think those of you who know Alex fairly well, and I'm sure Father Whelan, you've heard this expression many times, but if I've heard it once over the past 15 years that I've known Alex, I've heard it more than a dozen times and then some. A favorite phrase of his is, our citizenship is not of this world. And he not only says that, but he lives that message day in and day out. And when he couldn't work anymore to earn a living, to volunteer was only natural when he had that mindset. And that comes across in everything Alex does in his life, you know, with his family, with the community, with the church, but for God. Everything is always for God. And he lives through the Spirit, and he's just a wonderful witness to this faith and living as a citizen of heaven in this world.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank mostly Alex for coming here and being part of this, and for Barb for supporting us and answering all the questions I had about how we're going to do this, and especially for Jamie, who gave us some of the information to get us started. And I'm very, very, very pleased that so many have come out, and maybe we'll find new and different venues for the same presentation later on, Alex. Not going to get out so easy.
Be happy for
Thank
that.
you all.
Thank you.
There's a lot more coffee, a lot more